back to another edition of the Prepper Recon podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PREPPERRECON for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com. While you're at PrepperRecon.com, stop by the Prepper Recon supply store. We've got a great selection of Molly compression packs, hydration kits, and our new concealed carry tactical slings. All the packs and slings come with your choice of patch to let liberals know how you feel. We have some very cool Moulin Lab patches, Come and Take It patches, Sheepdog, Zombie Response Team, and matching U.S. flag patches. Of course, we still have our fully stocked Molly-compatible individual first aid kits as well. Just click the Store tab at the top of the PrepperRecon.com homepage. Today, we're honored to have David Quintieri of the Money GPS back on the show. David, welcome back.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And, now we've got some really, really timely news. And, you're kind of the expert in this field on these topics. So I want to get you on to weigh in on the Russian ruble and the ongoing collapse that's happening basically in real time. Can you just give us a quick overview of what happened to the ruble early last week?
Absolutely. So in order to explain what happened last week, we actually need to go back in time just a little bit. And we have been seeing what's been happening in the Ukraine, and that's obviously caused a lot of disturbance geopolitically. And part of what's happened there is that the West, NATO, the US primarily, they have decided to place sanctions upon Russia for their actions. So these sanctions undoubtedly hurt the local economies there. So you have Russia, actually Putin, admitting that the sanctions have accounted for approximately 25% of this drop that has occurred right now. So you actually have Putin admitting that. That's pretty amazing to see that. And basically what happened is over the past year, we had the ruble declining in value dramatically, with much of that coming just in the last week or 2 weeks, has been really suffering badly. Now, part of this is also because of the drop in oil. Russia being a very big exporter in oil, anytime the commodities are hurt, they're going to have a big problem. This goes for any commodity in any country around the world. If they are a particular country, for example, let's just take Chile with copper, you have a big problem if Chile has an earthquake, for example, because the copper prices, you can expect them to rise. You can have shortages that delays contracting and all sorts of things down the line. So it's pretty amazing to learn the different commodities that different countries have, and you can actually sort of predict what's going to happen later down the road for that commodity and how it affects it down the chain. So to go back to this issue here, we essentially have a situation where Russia's currency is hurting very bad. And of course, I would like to talk about this more further on in the interview, but essentially, this is foreshadowing what could certainly happen in the U.S.
And one of the things that Russia did to try to arrest the downward spiral of the ruble was to raise their interest rate nearly 7% in one day to bring it up to 17%. That seemed like it pulled the ruble out of free fall. Now, would America be able to raise rates to 17% if the dollar started collapsing like that?
Well, they did try this in approximately 1980 when Paul Volcker did this, and we saw that it actually was successful. I mean, that wasn't the only thing they did, but one of the things that they did do was dramatically increase interest rates, and it stopped the inflation. And also, this was a time when we had the oil shocks as well. So it is quite relevant here. But there was a much different economy back then, and we are talking about a much different United States. So if they were to do that, if they were to increase interest rates even to a couple of percent, never mind 7% or never mind 20% where it was in 1980, you are going to have a major crash. This is going to be disastrous. So they can't withstand it, as Russia seems to have been able to withstand that dramatic increase in the interest rates. The U.S. cannot.
And I think Russia's debt to GDP ratio is something like 15%. Meanwhile, here in America, we've got an $18 trillion debt. So if we had a 17% interest rate, we'd be talking about $3 trillion a year for debt service. So that's pretty much the entire revenue of the federal government.
They'll never be able to pay it back if they allow the interest rates to increase. It's just simply mathematically impossible. It can't be done, but the question is, they will eventually run out of options. So what will they do? This is going to be very interesting in the near future here as these things unfold. We're looking at through the crystal ball, and we're trying to figure out where is the good in this situation, where's the positivity, but it looks like there really isn't that much occurring.
Now, last Monday, the ruble lost something around 10%, and I believe last Tuesday it was something in the neighborhood of 20%. So we're talking about close to a 30% drop in about a 48-hour period. Now, if we were to see something like that happen to the dollar, can we sort of take that and overlay that as a transparency to the streets of the U.S.? What would we be looking at?
Well, I would definitely have to say that you would have the potential and a very realistic scenario of a series of events that occurs, and the most important to the individual citizen is that they will call bank holidays. These bank holidays will shut down the banks, and then they will decide what they're going to do for the people's money, essentially. So they could use lock the people out. They did this in Cyprus just recently, where they called a bank holiday, locked the people out, and then they scooped up money from their accounts, took it, and used that to recapitalize the banking industry. And this is something that could definitely happen. We've seen it before in history in many countries around the world where we have a situation where there is instability. And even in Russia, just recently, we saw how they just halted all the exchange trading because the currency was free falling at such a high rate that they didn't know what to do. They just shut it down. And that's what could happen. You could have the stock market temporarily shutting down in an instant. And people don't think it's possible, but just pick up your history book and read a little bit, and you'll see that it has happened before. So this is nothing new. It could very well happen again. But the stock market is definitely less important than its derivative. And what I would worry about most is people's pension funds that they are absolutely relying on to live. There are many people who believe that after retirement, they're getting an income. Now they think, well, it's a pension fund, it's not a stock. But they don't realize oftentimes, because they're not sophisticated investors, most people don't really care about it. They just do their 9 to 5, they work until they're 65, and they want to retire and get their money. But I would definitely say that they need to be worried about what happens in the stock market, and what happened in Russia just recently is foreshadowing what we're going to see.
And then you were talking about pension funds, and public service workers in Detroit have already had to settle for pennies on the dollar for their pension. Is that right?
That's right. It just goes to show you how bad things can get in an instant and how serious the situation is, because when they invest in all sorts of derivatives, they have asset-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, and all of the other jumble and jargon, and they use our own money, just, some innocent citizen's money, and then they gamble it away, and then they say, well, sorry, spent all your money. You don't get anything back from that, and that's just the way it's going to be. And it's going to get worse, because as conditions worsen, they need to basically cover for their losses, and it only gets worse. We saw that particularly in Greece with the credit default swaps and how bad things got.
It's time for a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proved to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on silver and gold. Check out Silver.com today.
Now, back in September, gold was trading at about 45,000 rubles for an ounce. Last Tuesday, we were way above 80,000 rubles per ounce, getting close to about 84,000 rubles per ounce just for that one day. But if we were to see something like that in America, would people still be able to walk into a gold shop and get out of their fiat paper currency and buy the coins on the day that that's happening?
I would say that they would probably run out of the metals virtually within an instant, but it also goes to show you what I was talking about earlier is, are you going to be able to access your cash in the banks to take the money out in order to buy the gold? Or will it be too late? Will your money be confiscated? Or will there be a bank holiday preventing you from getting your money out? And that's what concerns me most. People don't think about that. They just think about the short term, and they think, well, if the price goes up, I'll buy it then and hope that tomorrow it'll be worth even more. But if you don't have it already, the crisis isn't just going to happen, as slowly as you think it could. The price could dramatically rise, just as it did in Russia, dramatically in an instant. And you need to be prepared in advance. It's not about preparing as it happens. That doesn't work like that.
And then I suppose you can still buy things with your credit card, but now Apple completely quit selling online in Russia because I guess I don't understand how any importer would be able to keep making a profit if they're bringing goods in and the currency they're selling it for has a 30% devaluation in 48 hours.
That's right. And you look at that historically and you see that's the case because companies want to do business with stable currencies. That's the whole point they use a reserve currency in the first place, is the stability. But when you lose that stability, it affects everything down the line. There is a chain event that occurs, and it isn't necessarily the most predictable, but we can see the end result, and that's the individual is hurt by this. You look at any country that has a hyperinflation or even very high inflation, and you look at what it does to the individual citizen and how it affects the businesses, because they simply don't get the investment that they would previously, because people are worried about what their money's going to be worth a week from now, month, year down the road. So this is something that we need to learn from.
And last week, the Russian people were buying electronics, cars, furniture, anything they could do to get out of the ruble. Now, would we see that type of panic buying in the U.S. in that situation for folks that maybe had a little mattress money that they kept some cash in their house, or if credit cards were still functioning?
Yes, and you would actually see, if you look during any natural disaster, whether we saw, Hurricane Katrina or anything in recent years, we see the store shelves emptying dramatically, and you look at that, how serious it is, how people begin to panic for something that is relatively simple, or for example, individuals who are used to having hurricanes in their area, but still they are not prepared, and they rush to the store and they buy up everything that they can. And we see the chaos, we see the fights that occur. Now, what if people couldn't get their money out of the banking system? What if their currency was devalued, that they couldn't buy enough of what they needed? Well, that's when you get civil unrest. That's when you get riots occurring. This can occur for many different reasons, where we have an inflation or hyperinflationary scenario, could occur in a deflationary scenario, could be a natural disaster. There are all different ways that this could occur. And the absolute point, that is why preparation is essential now, not before, not after it's too late.
And you mentioned at the beginning of the show that the ruble is basically only as strong as the oil price. Last Tuesday, we saw oil at around $54 a barrel, and that was the same day that the ruble came close to 80 to 1 against the dollar. Do you think that the drop in the oil price, is that a result of natural market forces, or do you think that was financial warfare by the U.S.?
There are always currency wars taking place, and that has been escalating in recent years. We have seen the U.S. basically being party to this at every different level. It's going on all around the world, but China and Russia are definitely spearheading this movement against the US, against the West. And we look at what China is trying to do. In fact, if you look at the amount of treasuries and the debt that China and Russia are holding, in recent months, we've been seeing them declining. So they're trying to wean off of the US and their debt because, in fact, they said that, they're not really making the kind of money. In fact, they're losing money on buying treasuries, and they would rather invest in the development projects instead of just buying these treasuries all the time. They have literally trillions upon trillions of foreign reserves, and they want to diversify out of U.S. debt, and they want to get into the constructive projects, and whether that's U.S. real estate. I even saw them purchasing houses in Cyprus, and we've seen it all around the world essentially. But what we can be sure of is they want to go away from the U.S. dollar. This brings them to a currency war essentially, and they look at this as really what is best for China, what is best for Russia, and you see them partnering up. This has been going on for years, consistently making deals with each other in order to go away from the US dollar. And of course, commodities are very important to these nations. That is undoubtable. You look at Russia with their oil, it definitely is affected. But we know specifically that the markets are manipulated. Every single commodity is manipulated. When you look at the gold price, that's the gold future. That isn't the actual metal itself. Now, you can go to the store, you can get the metals at relatively the same price as the spot price that you would see online. However, it does not justify the actual price when they pull out money from these these futures, and all of a sudden the price goes down. Nobody with physical metal is selling anything. So we know, just as that example with gold, how that relates to oil.
And North Korea just successfully shut down Sony's release of a multi-million-dollar movie because it was insulting to Kim Jong-un. Now, do you think that if Russia perceived that this attack was done by the U.S. and it successfully crashed their economy, would you expect them to sit idly by and allow that?
That's a really interesting one. It's hard to tell. I would definitely say that they wouldn't enjoy it. But again, they've let them walk into Syria and they let them do all sorts of damage in there and fund ISIS there. And they're just almost seems like they're just letting it happen. And they, in fact, were initially Russia was sort of acting as a median in between the West and Syria, but it almost seems like they've backed away from that. So it's really hard to tell what Russia is up to at any point, but they don't seem to be backing down on the Ukraine at all. So we'll have to sort of keep an eye on it and see where it goes from there. It's definitely increasing with the geopolitical tension as time goes on. There are many different reasons why this could occur. We saw it with Georgia and Russia only a few years back, and things like this could escalate to the point of nuclear war. Like back on 888, we saw that very, very real threat occurring. So something like this could, in fact, occur in the near future.
And credit card frauds often trace back to Russian mobsters. They seem to have a knack for cyber infiltration. Do you think they could perhaps even use credit card fraud to disrupt our banking system?
They could do all sorts of cyber warfare because, historically people always believe that the battlefield is essentially two people fighting face-to-face, shooting each other in sort of a trench warfare type battle. But that isn't the way it is anymore. We have biological war, we have the cyber wars, we have all of the drone warfare. No longer is that sort of old school mentality relevant in today. We are looking at it from all different angles. And this is something that we need to realize, that just because we read something in the news doesn't necessarily mean we take it at face value. we need to look into it deeper. Now, we don't always find out the truth about everything. We can't get all the details, but something like this is definitely real and definitely a possibility.
And what other types of retaliatory options might Russia have? Do you think they'd be able to respond with sort of a like-kind attack against the dollar?
Absolutely. I mean, they could sell off all of their U.S. debt, and they could do that in an instant, but that would really hurt them big time. So they definitely are just going to go ahead with their same policy, and that is partnering up with the BRIC nations, trying to build that up, become partners with China, definitely help to build each other up over the next few years, and essentially lighten the load on how much U.S. debt they carry. That is the most realistic option I see, but we do see the geopolitical tension increasing right now, and it happened when we had with Syria and when the Ukraine crisis was going really hot. This is happening over and over again, and it seems that Russia is on the forefront of this battlefield. So it will be interesting to pay attention to as new times unfold.
And what steps would you recommend for people to take right now to prepare for a 30% drop in the dollar over a 48 period? Is something similar to what we just saw last week in the ruble?
Well, what I always advise is that if you're in the dollar, in whatever capacity that is, if you have, for example, a mutual fund, if you have stocks, if you have paper cash, if you have anything like this, it is all really a risk to be held. When you have these things, you need to realize that a devaluation of that currency means you own less of it. Your real wealth declines. But it is important to have things like cash on hand. Perhaps you do want some cash in the banks. It is very good thing to have to pay your bills, and you get your pay stub gets put in there automatically, so on. You want some of this cash available, but you do not want to put your savings in U.S. denominated debt. In fact, any paper assets, I would say, are at risk, whether it's with the inflationary scenario, whether it's through a bail-in, whether they take a levy. This is what they're calling it now in certain regions in Europe. They're calling it a levy. It's not a tax, of course. It's just a levy where they can just scoop out money from your bank account. They can do this to quote-unquote uninsured accounts. That's anything over $100,000. That would be your mutual funds or stocks. They could just scoop your money right out of your bank. And this is the kind of thing that you need to worry about. So definitely having your money in the banking system puts it at risk. And then you need to take your savings and invest it in things that are real. I don't necessarily recommend you put all of your money into gold and silver. Don't have 100% of your money in there. You want to own some gold and silver. You also want to own it, I believe, in the smallest denominations that you can. Holding it in what they call junk or common silver is excellent because you'll never have to worry about confiscation. Many people discuss that, why it's apparently not a good idea to own gold. I disagree, but you definitely want to hold it in diversified amounts. So you want these small denominations, and you definitely don't want to have it all in the same type. You don't want just 1 ounce bullion bars. It would be good to have different coins, some bars. You want the junk or common silver. You want silver bars, silver coins, and have that diversification even within the spectrum of the precious metals themselves. And then we go off thinking so big with real estate. Well, I don't have 300,000. I don't have 500,000. I can't afford a home. But look into smaller things. You need to think small sometimes. What about a parking lot, a parking space in a really good building? What about a storage locker? Things like this will cost a lot less, and that's less capital for you to put in, and it's also a potential for a lot of storage of value, but also the potential to make money as well. So these are things that we need to look into. I just say invest in real assets. If it's real, if you can touch it, if it's tangible, it's worth more than the paper garbage that we're being forced to accept.
And then you said limit your exposure to U.S. denominated debt. Now, I'm looking at a $20 bill, and on the top of it, it says Federal Reserve Note. Now, if I have a note on my house, that's a debt instrument. If I have a note on my car, that's a debt instrument. Is this Federal Reserve Note, is that a U.S. dollar denominated debt instrument that you're recommending that we limit our exposure to?
That's right. It is debt. The entire currency system is built upon debt. You cannot have any wealth anymore because it's all built upon debt. They designed it on purpose because they can then control the debt that they put wealth. Then they have an opportunity to make money. They have an opportunity to succeed, and they don't want that. They want people to be serfs. They want people to have to go back hundreds and thousands of years where we have this great divide or a chasm in between the rich and the poor, and we see that right now. We see how they're the very rich who are controlling the monetary system, and then we have an increasingly large poor class or lower income class that is just getting bigger and bigger, and we see the food stamps rising. We see the disability. We see all the different welfares programs that are increasing day by day on average. And then we look at the savings rate. People aren't able to save anymore. We look at every single statistic that matters, and we realize how bad things really are. And when you hold onto that paper, you're going to be crushed.
And David, as soon as I saw this action in the ruble, the first thing I did is I went over to the Money GPS, the YouTube channel, because I knew you'd be on top of it. So, and I was right. You had a great video that was very explanatory and really helped me understand what was happening there. And you're really, really on top of this stuff. So I really recommend that anytime anything starts blowing up in the world financially, that folks head over to YouTube and check out the Money GPS YouTube channel. Now, you've also got a website. You wrote a book called The Money GPS, and you've got some ebooks. Can you tell folks about that as well?
Absolutely. So the YouTube channel is where I post basically every single day, and I like to just talk about what's happening in the news, but also connect the dots. I don't just like to read you the articles because, you can do that on your own. So I like to connect the dots and show you how this is important, how it makes sense in a historical context, and then sort of you can sort of decide how that is for the future. It's very important to look into these things, not just at face value, but to look into them deeper. So that's what we get to on there. There are over 11,000 subscribers on there, so I would hope to see you guys all on there. And I do have a book, The Money GPS, and it is available at Amazon. And I wrote it a few years ago, and I like to get into the same sort of topics that I do on the videos as well. So if you enjoy the videos, perhaps you'll enjoy the book. And essentially, I've used diagrams and charts and really made it easy for people to, with a very basic understanding of economics. You don't need any sort of certificate or anything. We just made it for the average person to understand what's happening with the political system, with also the economic system, how they use this against us, and how you can empower yourself. So my website is themoneygps.com, and that's essentially where I post all of my YouTube stuff gets posted on there. And then there's the free ebooks. Always in the description of any of my videos, I have these 3 free ebooks that get into different topics as well, because I like to share the information. And then if it's free, hopefully people will share that to their friends and family, and we can spread the message of truth.
Well, I'd like to wish all of our listeners out there a very Merry Christmas, and Merry Christmas to you, David. And thanks again for making time. I know this is a busy week for everybody, and you made time to come on the show and help hash all that out for us. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas to you too. And the same to you as well. We need to get the information out there, and we're going to have to work overtime to really get this before the collapse ensues.
Hey, Preppers and Patriots. The day after Christmas, my latest book, The Days of Noah, Book 1, Conspiracy, will be on sale for 99 cents for the Kindle version. So if you still haven't read it, this is your chance to get it at a great price. Once again, Merry Christmas, and I really hope you enjoy your holiday and enjoy your family. God bless.
Are we living in a time of which there is more prophetic writings than of any period in history? Watch through the eyes of Noah Parker and his family as a global empire takes shape. Ancient writings are fulfilled, and the last days fall upon the once great United States of America. The Days of Noah, Book 1, Conspiracy by Mark Goodwin, is a fast-paced fiction thriller which looks at how modern conspiracies could play into biblical prophecy concerning end times. Buy The Days of Noah in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition at Amazon.com today.